Something extraordinary is happening right now, at this very moment, and most people aren't even noticing it. There's a quiet revolution taking place, not in the streets, not in the headlines, but in the hearts and minds of people who are waking up to a different way of being. These individuals are stepping back from the noise, the chaos, the endless pursuit of more, and they're finding something that society has forgotten how to value. They're finding peace, they're finding themselves. And they're quietly disappearing from the world as we've known it. Now, when I say disappearing, I don't mean they're vanishing into thin air. I mean, they're choosing to live differently. They're no longer interested in the games that society plays. They're not competing for status. They're not seeking approval from people who don't even know themselves. They're not measuring their worth by the size of their bank account or the brand of car they drive or how many followers they have on social media. They've awakened to something greater, something that's been inside them all along. And once you see it, once you really understand it, you can never go back to sleep. This awakening isn't about religion, though it can include it. It isn't about joining a cult or renouncing the world, though some people misunderstand it that way. It's about recognizing that you are not who you've been told you are. You are not your job title. You are not your past mistakes. You are not the labels that others have placed on you. You are not even the thoughts that run through your mind day after day. You are something far more magnificent, far more powerful, and when you begin to realize this, everything changes. The spiritually awake person begins to see through the illusions that keep most people trapped. They see that the pursuit of external validation is a trap. They understand that trying to find happiness in possessions is like trying to quench your thirst by drinking salt water. The more you drink, the thirstier you become. They recognize that the constant need for approval from others is a prison that keeps you from ever being truly free. And so they begin to withdraw, not because they're running away, but because they're running towards something real. You see, when you wake up spiritually, you start to notice how much energy you've been wasting, how much time you've spent worrying about what other people think, how many hours you've lost scrolling through other people's lives, comparing yourself, judging yourself, feeling inadequate, how many conversations you've had that were completely empty, just words filling silence with no real connection, no real truth being spoken. And you begin to ask yourself, is this really living? Is this what I came here to do? The answer that comes back is always no. You didn't come here to fit in. You didn't come here to please everyone. You didn't come here to live someone else's dream or follow someone else's rules about what success looks like. You came here to be yourself, your authentic self, the self that exists beyond all the conditioning and programming and expectations. And when you start living from that place, you naturally begin to pull away from the things that don't serve your highest good. This is why spiritually awake people seem to disappear. They stop showing up to events that drain them. They stop maintaining relationships that are based on obligation rather than genuine connection. They stop participating in conversations that revolve around gossip, judgment, and negativity. They stop watching the news obsessively, allowing fear to be pumped into their consciousness day after day. They stop filling every moment with noise and distraction because they've learned that silence is where the truth lives. And here's what's beautiful about this. When you make these changes, you're not being selfish. You're actually being the most generous version of yourself. Because when you stop living from a place of fear, resentment, and depletion, you have so much more to give. When you stop trying to be everything to everyone, you can actually be present for the people who truly matter. When you stop scattering your energy in 1,000 different directions, you can focus it like a laser beam on what really counts. But let's be honest, this path isn't easy. Society doesn't reward the person who steps off the treadmill. Your family might not understand why you're suddenly questioning everything. Your friends might feel abandoned when you stop joining them in activities that no longer resonate with you. Your coworkers might think you've become strange when you stop participating in the office drama. And there will be moments when you doubt yourself, when you wonder if maybe everyone else is right and you're the one who's lost. This is the test. This is where you find out how committed you are to your own truth, because the pressure to conform is enormous. We are social creatures, and we're wired to want to belong to the tribe. For thousands of years, being cast out from the group meant death. So when you start living differently, that ancient fear gets triggered. Your ego starts screaming at you, warning you that you're making a terrible mistake, that you'll end up alone, that you'll regret this. But if you can sit with that fear, if you can breathe through it and not react to it, something miraculous happens. You realize that the fear is just a feeling, and feelings pass. You realize that you're not actually going to die from being different. You realize that there are others out there who are on the same path, who understand what you're going through, who will celebrate your awakening rather than fear it. And you realize that the cost of staying asleep, of continuing to live a life that isn't true to who you are, is far greater than the temporary discomfort of waking up. The spiritually awake person understands that this physical world, as real as it seems, is not all there is. They understand that we are spiritual beings having a human experience, not human beings hoping to have a spiritual experience. And when you truly get this, when you really feel it in your bones, your priorities shift dramatically. You stop being so attached to outcomes. You stop needing life to look a certain way. You stop fighting against reality and start flowing with it. This doesn't mean you become passive or that you stop having goals. It means you hold your goals lightly. You do your best, you take action, you move toward what calls to you, but you're not attached to specific results. You trust that there's an intelligence in the universe that's far greater than your limited perspective, and you're willing to surrender to it. You're willing to say, I'll do my part, and I'll trust that whatever happens is what's meant to happen. This kind of trust is radical in a world that's built on control. We're taught from an early age that we have to make things happen, that we have to push and strive and hustle, that rest is laziness and surrendering is giving up. But the spiritually awake person knows that there's a difference between effort and struggle. Effort is natural, like a river flowing downstream. Struggle is swimming upstream, fighting against the current, exhausting yourself for very little progress. When you're aligned with your true self, when you're living from your inner guidance rather than from fear or external pressure, things flow, opportunities appear, the right people show up, doors open that you didn't even know existed. This isn't magic, though it can feel that way. It's simply what happens when you stop blocking your own path. Most of us spend our lives standing in our own way, sabotaging ourselves with limiting beliefs, negative self-talk, and the constant need to control everything. When you step aside and let life move through you, miracles become commonplace. But here's something important to understand. This awakening doesn't mean your life becomes perfect. It doesn't mean you never experience pain or loss or disappointment. What it means is that you experience these things differently. You don't add suffering on top of pain. You don't create stories about what it all means about you or your worth. You don't resist what is. You allow life to be exactly as it is in this moment, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's not what you wanted. This is perhaps the most challenging aspect of spiritual awakening, and it's why so many people turn back. They think that waking up means feeling blissful all the time, floating around in some permanent state of enlightenment. But real awakening is about being present to all of life, the joy and the sorrow, the pleasure and the pain, the birth and the death. It's about having the courage to feel everything without numbing yourself, without escaping, without pretending. And this is why spiritually awake people often become quieter, not because they have nothing to say, but because they've learned the power of silence. They've learned that not every thought needs to be spoken, not every opinion needs to be shared, not every moment needs to be filled with words. They've learned to listen more than they talk, to observe more than they judge, to be present more than they plan. In a world that's constantly shouting, silence is revolutionary. In a culture that's addicted to noise and stimulation, stillness is an act of rebellion. The spiritually awake person has found something in the silence that most people are terrified to encounter, themselves. And once you meet yourself, really meet yourself, without all the masks and defenses and pretenses, you're never the same. This meeting with yourself is both terrifying and liberating. Terrifying because you have to face all the parts of yourself that you've been running from, the anger you've suppressed, the grief you've avoided, the shame you've been carrying, the ways you've hurt others, the ways you've abandoned yourself. It's all there, waiting to be acknowledged, to be felt, to be released. And this process of facing your shadow, of bringing light to the dark corners of your psyche, is not for the faint of heart, but it's also liberating, because on the other side of that darkness is freedom. When you stop running from yourself, when you stop trying to be perfect or pretending to have it all together, when you simply allow yourself to be human, flawed, messy, and real, you discover a peace that doesn't depend on circumstances. You discover a joy that isn't contingent on getting what you want. You discover a love for yourself and for life that can't be taken away. This is what the spiritually awake person has found, and this is why they're disappearing from society as we know it. They're not interested in the superficial anymore. They're not impressed by wealth or fame or power. They're not seduced by the latest trend or the newest gadget. They've tasted something real, and everything else seems bland in comparison. They're creating lives that reflect their inner values rather than society's expectations. They're choosing meaningful work over prestigious titles. They're choosing authentic relationships over large social circles. They're choosing presence over productivity. They're choosing being over doing. And in a world that measures everything by external markers of success, these choices make them invisible. But here's the beautiful irony. In becoming invisible to the world, they become visible to themselves. In letting go of who they thought they should be, they become who they truly are. In releasing the need for external validation, they find an inner validation that's unshakable. In disappearing from society's spotlight, they step into their own light. And this light, this inner radiance that comes from living authentically, from being true to yourself, from aligning with your highest values, this light attracts others who are ready to wake up. You don't have to preach or convince or convert anyone. You simply live your truth, and those who resonate with it will find you. Those who are ready for their own awakening will see in you a permission slip to begin their own journey. This is how change really happens, not through force or argument or trying to make people see things your way, but through embodiment. When you embody peace, you teach peace. When you embody love, you teach love. When you embody authenticity, you give others permission to be authentic. You become a walking, breathing example of another way to live, and that example is more powerful than 1,000 words. The spiritually awake person understands that their primary responsibility is to their own consciousness. Not in a selfish way, but in recognition that the only thing they can truly change is themselves. They can't change their partner, their parents, their children, their boss, or the world, but they can change how they show up. They can change their perspective. They can change their responses. They can change their energy. And in changing themselves, they change everything. This is what it means to be the change you want to see in the world. It's not about trying to fix everything out there. It's about fixing what's in here, in your own heart, in your own mind, in your own consciousness. It's about healing your own wounds so you stop unconsciously wounding others. It's about finding your own peace so you stop contributing to the collective chaos. It's about loving yourself so you can truly love others. And as you do this work, as you commit to your own growth and evolution, you naturally begin to vibrate at a different frequency. You become less reactive and more responsive. You become less judgmental and more accepting. You become less fearful and more trusting. You become less separate and more connected. And this shift in frequency changes everything about how you experience life. Things that used to trigger you no longer have the same power. People who used to drain you no longer have access to your energy. Situations that used to stress you out no longer disturb your peace. Not because the world has changed, but because you have changed. You've developed what some call spiritual immunity. You're no longer infected by the negativity, the fear, the drama that's so prevalent in our culture. This doesn't mean you become cold or indifferent. In fact, the opposite is true. As you become more peaceful within yourself, you become more compassionate toward others. You understand that everyone is doing the best they can with the level of consciousness they currently have. You see that the people who hurt others are hurting themselves. You recognize that judgment and cruelty come from pain, not from strength. And this understanding allows you to respond to difficulty with grace rather than with more difficulty. The spiritually awake person has learned to hold space for contradiction. They understand that you can love someone and still maintain boundaries. You can be compassionate without being a doormat. You can be open-minded without losing your discernment. You can be accepting of what is without becoming passive. You can be peaceful without being apathetic. These paradoxes, which seem impossible to the unawakened mind, become natural when you're operating from a higher level of consciousness. And this is why these individuals are often misunderstood. People who are still operating from ego consciousness can't comprehend how someone can be so calm, so centered, so unmoved by the things that everyone else is upset about. They might mistake peace for weakness, surrender for laziness, acceptance for apathy. They might think you don't care when really you've learned to care without being controlled by your caring. You've learned that you can hold space for someone's pain without taking it on as your own. You can witness someone struggle without trying to fix them. You can offer love without attachment to whether it's received. You can show up fully without losing yourself in the process. These are advanced spiritual skills, and they require practice, patience, and a lot of inner work. The path of awakening is not a linear journey. It's not like climbing a mountain where you just keep going up until you reach the top. It's more like a spiral where you keep coming back to the same lessons but at deeper and deeper levels. You think you've learned something, you think you've healed something, and then life presents it to you again in a different form. And you realize there's another layer, another level of understanding, another opportunity to grow. This can be frustrating, especially in a culture that's obsessed with quick fixes and instant results. We want awakening to be like flipping a switch, where suddenly everything is clear and we never struggle again. But real transformation doesn't work that way. It's a process of continuous unfolding, of constant refinement, of ongoing surrender. It's a practice, not a destination. And this is why the spiritually awake person has developed patience. They've learned that everything happens in its own time. You can't force a flower to bloom. You can't make a caterpillar transform into a butterfly any faster than it naturally takes. And you can't rush your own evolution. You can support it, you can create conditions that are favorable for it, but ultimately you have to trust the process and allow it to unfold naturally. This patience extends to how they relate to others. They've stopped trying to wake people up who aren't ready to wake up. They've learned that you can't give someone an experience they're not ready for. You can't make someone see what they're not ready to see. You can plant seeds, you can be an example, you can offer guidance when asked, but you can't do the work for them. Everyone has to walk their own path, make their own mistakes, learn their own lessons. This realization is both humbling and freeing. Humbling because you have to accept that you're not responsible for anyone else's journey. You're not here to save anyone. You're not here to fix anyone. You're not here to convince anyone. And that can be hard, especially when you see people you love suffering, making choices that are clearly harming them, staying stuck in patterns that are keeping them small. You want to help, you want to show them a better way, but you have to respect their free will. And it's freeing because once you accept that you're not responsible for anyone else's awakening, you can release that burden. You can let go of the need to control or change or fix. You can simply love people where they are without needing them to be anywhere else. You can offer support without attachment to the outcome. You can be there without losing yourself. And this kind of love, this unconditional presence, is actually more helpful than any amount of advice or intervention. The spiritually awake person has learned that true power comes from within, not power over others, not power to control or dominate or force, but power to create, power to choose, power to respond rather than react. This inner power isn't dependent on external circumstances. It doesn't come from having money or status or influence. It comes from knowing who you are beyond all the temporary roles and identities. When you know yourself as awareness, as the consciousness that's observing your thoughts rather than the thoughts themselves, when you know yourself as the presence that's witnessing your emotions rather than the emotions themselves, when you know yourself as the spirit that's animating your body rather than the body itself, you access a power that can't be taken from you. No one can take away your awareness. No one can take away your presence. No one can take away your spirit. This is the greatest gift of spiritual awakening, the discovery that you are already whole, already complete, already enough. You don't need to achieve anything, acquire anything, or become anything to be worthy. You are worthy because you exist. You are valuable because you are alive. You are enough because you are you. And this realization changes everything about how you move through the world. You stop seeking validation from others because you've found validation within yourself. You stop comparing yourself to others because you understand that everyone is on their own unique path. You stop competing because you realize that there's enough for everyone, that someone else's success doesn't diminish your own. You stop performing because you no longer need to prove anything to anyone, including yourself. This is the freedom that spiritually awake people have discovered, and this is why they're quietly stepping back from a society that's built on the opposite principles. Our culture is built on the belief that you're not enough as you are, that you need more, you need better, you need different, that you need to keep striving, keep achieving, keep accumulating, that your worth is measured by your productivity, your success is measured by your possessions, and your value is measured by your popularity. But the awakened person has seen through this lie. They've recognized it for what it is, A system designed to keep you on the hamster wheel, always chasing, never arriving, always feeling inadequate, never feeling complete. They've stepped off that wheel, and in doing so, they've stepped out of the mainstream. They've become outliers, not because they're trying to be different, but because they're trying to be real. And being real in a world of pretense is radical. Being authentic in a world of masks is revolutionary. Being present in a world of distraction is transformative, not just for yourself, but for everyone around you. Because when you stop participating in the collective illusion, you create a crack in that illusion. You show others that there's another way. You become a beacon for those who are ready to find their way home to themselves. This is the quiet revolution that's happening. Not in the streets, not in the headlines, but in hearts and homes and small moments of courage where people are choosing truth over comfort, authenticity over acceptance, being over having. And while it might seem like these people are disappearing, what's really happening is they're emerging. They're emerging from the cocoon of conditioning into the butterfly of their true nature. And yes, this means they're less visible in the conventional sense. They're not on social media as much, they're not at every party, they're not climbing the corporate ladder, they're not competing in the status game. But they're more present in the ways that matter. They're there for the people they love. They're engaged in work that has meaning. They're contributing to their communities in quiet, humble ways. They're living with integrity, with intention, with awareness. They've discovered that the richest life is not the one with the most possessions, but the one with the most presence. The most successful life is not the one with the most achievements, but the one with the most authenticity. The most meaningful life is not the one with the most followers, but the one with the most love. And they're choosing these things over what society says they should want. This choice requires courage because it means standing alone sometimes. It means being misunderstood. It means walking a path that doesn't have a guidebook or a guarantee. It means trusting yourself when everyone else thinks you're wrong. It means listening to your inner voice when the outer voices are so much louder. It means believing in something that can't be seen, can't be measured, can't be proven by conventional standards. But for those who have awakened, there's no going back. Once you've tasted freedom, you can't return to the prison. Once you've experienced truth, you can't accept the lies. Once you've felt what it's like to be truly alive, you can't go back to merely existing. The awakened person would rather stand alone in their truth than sit in comfort in a lie. And here's what's beautiful, they're not alone. There are millions of people around the world who are going through this same awakening, this same transformation, this same quiet revolution. They might not know each other, they might never meet, but they're connected by something deeper than physical proximity. They're connected by consciousness, by shared values, by a commitment to living authentically. These are the people who are creating a new earth, not by trying to change the old one, but by embodying a different way of being. They're raising the collective consciousness simply by raising their own. They're healing the world by healing themselves. They're bringing more light simply by being more light. And while this might not make the news, while this might not seem dramatic or exciting, it's the most important work happening on the planet right now. Because the problems we face as a species, the environmental crisis, the social divisions, the violence, the suffering, these problems can't be solved at the level of consciousness that created them. We need a shift, a fundamental transformation in how we see ourselves, how we see each other, and how we see our relationship with all of life. And that shift is happening person by person, moment by moment, choice by choice. The spiritually awake person is part of this shift. They're living proof that another way is possible. They're walking examples of what happens when you choose love over fear, presence over distraction, being over doing, truth over comfort. And while they might be quiet, while they might be stepping back from society as we've known it, their impact is profound because transformation is contagious. When you change yourself, you change the field around you. When you raise your frequency, you affect everyone you encounter. When you embody peace, you transmit peace. When you live in alignment with your highest self, you inspire others to do the same. You don't have to try to make an impact. You make an impact simply by being who you truly are. This is the great paradox of spiritual awakening. In letting go of trying to change the world, you change it more effectively than you ever could through force or effort. In surrendering your need to make a difference, you make the biggest difference. In disappearing from the old paradigm, you help birth the new one. Not by fighting against what is, but by embodying what could be. So if you're one of these people who's feeling called to step back, to simplify, to turn inward, to live more consciously, know that you're not alone. Know that you're not crazy. Know that what you're feeling is real and valid and important. You're part of something much bigger than yourself. You're part of the evolution of consciousness on this planet. You're part of the awakening that's been prophesied for thousands of years. And yes, it can be lonely sometimes. Yes, it can be hard to explain to people who don't understand. Yes, it can feel like you're going against the current, swimming upstream while everyone else is floating downstream. But you're not lost. You're not making a mistake. You're not running away from life. You're running toward life, real life, authentic life, conscious life. The path of awakening asks everything of you. It asks you to question everything you've been taught, to release everything that's not truly yours, to become so honest with yourself that you can't hide behind any mask, any excuse, any story. It asks you to face your fears, feel your pain, acknowledge your shadow, and take full responsibility for your life. It's not easy. It was never meant to be easy, but it's worth it. Oh, it's so worth it. Because on the other side of all that work, all that discomfort, all that letting go, you find yourself. Not the self that society created, not the self that your parents wanted, not the self that your ego constructed, but your true self. The self that's been there all along, waiting patiently for you to remember who you really are. And that self is magnificent. That self is powerful beyond measure. That self is connected to everything, a part of everything, an expression of the divine intelligence that created the universe. That self knows no limits, fears no death, needs no approval. That self is free, utterly and completely free. And that self is who you really are. This is what spiritually awake people have realized, and this is why they're quietly disappearing from a society that keeps you from this truth. They're not disappearing because they're giving up. They're disappearing because they're waking up. They're stepping out of the illusion and into reality. They're leaving the prison and entering freedom. They're releasing the false and embracing the true. And the invitation is open to anyone who's ready. You don't have to be special. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to have all the answers. You just have to be willing. Willing to question, willing to feel, willing to change, willing to grow, willing to let go of everything that's keeping you small so you can become everything you were meant to be. The world needs people who are awake, not to save it, but to show others that waking up is possible. Not to fix it, but to demonstrate that there's another way to live. Not to lead a movement, but to be the change. And as more and more people make this choice, as more and more individuals step into their truth, the collective consciousness shifts. The old paradigm begins to crumble. The new paradigm begins to emerge. This is not happening sometime in the future. This is happening right now. This is happening in you, if you allow it. This is happening through you, if you choose it. This is happening as you, when you remember who you truly are. So don't wait for permission. Don't wait for the perfect moment. Don't wait until you feel ready. The time is now. The place is here. The person is you. Wake up. Step into your truth. Live from your highest self. And trust that as you do, you're contributing to something so much greater than yourself. You're part of the awakening of humanity. You're part of the transformation of consciousness. You're part of the quiet revolution that's changing everything, one person at a time, starting with you.